Welcome to NextGen Timber, where dead trees split without warning, overloaded winches pull at the edge of failure, and every chainsaw cut is a direct negotiation with gravity. Out here, modern forestry is not clean or predictable. It is steel, pressure, timing, and risk stacked together in the same job. Tree removal near houses, roads, and active work zones changes everything. This is not just about cutting a trunk and waiting for it to fall. Every move has to account for balance, hinge strength, lean direction, cable tension, nearby buildings, escape routes, and the people standing around the job. The first tree already proves how fast a normal removal can turn aggressive. A dangerously overextended section bends farther and farther under its own weight, loading itself like a giant spring. Then comes the evergreen oak, and that situation nearly goes far beyond what anyone expected. It was not just threatening to fall, it was carrying enough weight, tension, and unpredictable lean to turn one small mistake into a catastrophic impact. But then we see what experience looks like. In skilled hands, giant timber stops being pure chaos and becomes a technical problem. The logger reads the lean, watches the pressure, controls the cut, and works step by step instead of forcing the tree. That is the difference between somebody using a chainsaw and somebody actually understanding timber. The next warning is serious. If you ever see a recovery setup under heavy tension, stay far away. Winch lines, chains, and cables do not fail gently. When they snap under load, the stored energy releases instantly, and everything in the line of fire becomes dangerous. A few moments later, the crew starts shouting as the trunk finally begins to move. Everyone locks onto the fall path, watching whether the tree follows the plan or writes its own. That waiting moment is always tense, because the last few seconds decide whether the cut was right or whether the whole job is about to turn into chaos. Then the atmosphere shifts completely as the Cambio 800 and CIM 750 combination starts tearing through timber like a full industrial processing line. Raw logs disappear into the system, and finished material shoots out almost immediately. Fast feeding, clean output, non-stop mechanical rhythm. This is the kind of production flow large-scale timber crews depend on when efficiency matters. Then we get pure old-school logging culture with the 1987 Peterbilt 359. Classic nose, heavy frame, raw diesel power, and a presence modern trucks often cannot fake. Built for brutal forest roads in Manitoba, this is the kind of machine that earned respect before electronics started doing half the thinking. Next, the logger cuts deep into an enormous old-growth tree. The wood fibers begin cracking under extreme internal pressure, and when the final holding section lets go, the massive trunk drops with terrifying force. The stump tears apart, the forest floor shakes, and the saw is dropped clear just in time. That is not drama. That is thousands of pounds of timber releasing all at once. Then the GV75 winch system starts pulling under serious load. The chassis shifts, weight comes off the front axle, and traction begins disappearing exactly where the operator needs it most. In muddy Balkan terrain, this is the kind of situation crews face constantly. Maximum pulling force, unstable ground, and very little room for correction. One of the most violent moments arrives when a cedar trunk suddenly splits lengthwise under internal pressure. The split rips through the wood so aggressively it almost looks unreal. But that is the point. Timber stores energy in ways people underestimate, and even experienced predictions can be wrong when pressure builds deep inside the trunk. Then a recovery fails hard. The chain snaps under extreme load, and the tension releases in a fraction of a second. That one moment turns the entire area into a danger zone. It is a clear reminder that brute force without safe setup is not strength. It is a gamble. That is exactly why protective equipment matters. Helmets, harnesses, eye protection, rated cables, escape paths, and distance from the pull line are not optional details. They are the difference between a hard job and a serious accident when heavy timber starts moving. Next comes one of those homemade machines that looks rough until it starts working. Massive logs that would normally take exhausting labor get split into uniform pieces almost effortlessly. The engineering may look basic, but the result is practical, direct, and surprisingly effective. Then communication starts falling apart. Someone disconnects during the middle of the job while the crew is still coordinating movement around the cut zone. In forestry, confusion spreads fast. Bad communication can become just as dangerous as the tree itself. The heavy forestry truck then struggles through deep, muddy ruts inside a narrow forest road. The massive vehicle sinks, slides, and fights its own weight while the driver carefully manages throttle and traction. One wrong input, and the truck could be buried in the terrain instead of moving through it. Then the advanced forestry harvester takes over. Its hydraulic cutting head grips the fallen tree while rotating blades strip branches in seconds. Dense forest timber becomes clean, transport-ready logs through speed, precision, and crushing industrial force. This is where NextGen Timber technology changes the pace completely. Near Henderson Lake, the Hayes HDX winch system controls movement across dangerous terrain like a giant stabilizing mechanism. On ground like this, one uncontrolled slide could destroy everything downhill. The job is not just pulling, it is controlled restraint under pressure. Then the operator cuts deep into a trunk and quickly realizes the chain has become badly worn from heavy resistance. When he tries cutting from the opposite side, the dull chain barely bites. That forces more pressure, more effort, and more risk. Then comes one of the worst setups imaginable. No protective gear, a ladder, and a partially split tree hanging under tension. That is not forestry. That is disaster waiting for timing. The experienced logger later drives the chainsaw deep into a massive old-growth trunk. The final fibers begin to crack, and the ancient tree collapses along the saw line with explosive force. But even after the tree is down, the danger is not over. While cutting the fallen trunk into sections, compressed wood unexpectedly splits and kicks apart near the operator. That is the brutal truth of timber work. A tree can still hurt you badly after it hits the ground. And honestly, some operators have no business touching a chainsaw. Sometimes you can see it immediately in the stance, the saw handling, and the body position. The forest exposes poor technique fast. High above the ground, a climber cuts a heavy suspended branch while secured by ropes. The moment the limb breaks free, it kicks and rebounds violently through the air, nearly throwing him backward. Even a controlled cut can create dangerous recoil forces at height, which is why harnesses, helmets, eye protection, and secured lines are not optional in professional tree work. Then an overloaded logging truck hauls a huge unstable stack of timber through a snowy forest road. Massive logs shift and hang outward above the trailer, making every bump and turn a test of balance. The next scene gets worse, as a heavy forestry machine loses stability on an icy mountainside and rolls into the frozen ditch below. Now the operation becomes recovery work, and extracting that overturned equipment from a steep winter slope is its own dangerous job. Then we reach a hollow tree burning from the inside. That is a different category of danger. Every cut becomes a calculation against collapse, hidden weak spots, trapped heat, and unpredictable movement. This is not standard felling anymore. It is controlled survival under pressure. And then the feared moment happens. The cut sends the trunk shifting in the wrong direction, and everyone watching knows somebody could get hurt. You can hear the panic building before the tree even finishes moving. Another logger cuts through a partially suspended tree while massive branches remain tangled high between nearby trunks. When the final support gives way, the entire upper section collapses in a violent chain reaction. Then the Cranman Bison 10000X rolls in like a compact forestry factory. Cutting, lifting, feeding, and processing are all built into one machine, turning difficult timber handling into a streamlined mechanical operation. The focus then shifts toward public safety near roads, homes, and infrastructure. Logging in these places is no longer just timber work. It becomes risk management, where every cut must protect the structures, people, and equipment around the fall zone. Then comes one of the harshest truths in logging. A fallen tree can still injure you after it is on the ground. Recoil force can travel through the trunk, shift pressure, throw material, and punish anyone standing too close. Moments later, the forest hits back again. One bad branch movement, and the tree lashes out like it is fighting the cutter directly. Logging has a way of punishing overconfidence immediately. Finally, the tension drops. The crew guides the load into place, the machinery settles down, and after all the noise, pressure, recoil, and risk, the operation finally comes together the way it was supposed to. That is NextGen Timber. Exploding cedar trunks, overloaded winches, snapping chains, burning hollow trees, classic logging trucks, advanced harvesters, brutal recovery systems, and crews fighting gravity deep in the wilderness. Subscribe now for more dangerous tree felling, raw logging footage, next-generation forestry machines, and extreme timber operations from the harshest environments on Earth.